the Irish Skean. So this was a fighting knife, and so little is known about them. Hi, it's Tod at Tod's Workshop. I'm Tod Cutler here, and today we are going to talk about the Irish Skean. So these are fantastically interesting and mysterious fighting knives. 15th, 16th, 17th centuries in Ireland. So it's a Gaelic fighting knife that was everywhere. You see it in the pictures, you read about it in the literature, but there are so few of them left. But before we carry on and we talk about the knives themselves, we're going to have a little bit of background about why I'm making them and what it's all about. Last year, a great new book came out, and it is The Skean by Robert Gresh. And one of the things that makes this a really good book is the information in it is basically not replicated anywhere else. So this was a fighting knife, a massively important fighting knife of Ireland for the best part of 300 years. So this book covers 1500 to 1700, but they would have gone a little bit earlier than that. And so little is known about them. You can't find this information in other places. So if I look for a book on bollock daggers or something, I'll see the same dagger in several of the books that I have. Rondel daggers, the same thing. The Skean, there is nothing, and I'm telling you now, of any importance that is not in this book. Anyway, this is not a book review about that. But the thing is, what we did do is we had a quick chat about these things, and he asked if I would make a Tod Cutler version, basically an accessible version of the Skean for the masses. And that is what I have done. So we have ourselves a long one and a short one. Skean fada, modoga. Pronunciation was probably hideous, but I am not 16th century Gaelic. Skean came in two varieties. And first of all, we're going to talk about the Skean fada and later on the modoga. Make no mistake about it, Skean fada were big knives. So this one here has got a 14.5-inch blade, 38 centimetres, 8 millimetres thick, which is, I think, 5/16 of an inch, something like that. But this isn't the biggest. So we've got a good example here, 12 millimetre thick, 1/2-inch spine. Absolute monster. So when you're talking about a knife like that, that's like part sword, part dagger, part bar mace. It's going to be one heck of a piercer, but it's also going to be one heck of a club as well. And this Tod Cutler piece here is a formidable fighting knife. It really is. But the long blade is twinned with a fairly short handle. And that is exactly as the originals were. Now, if we look at this dirk here, you can see that there's striking similarities between the blade forms. Very broad, single-edged, well, relatively thick, relatively long. And the thing is, there's cultural ties, very strong cultural ties between Scotland and Ireland. So you can imagine, and it's not unreasonable, that there would be similarities between the two. But then when it comes to the grips, actually they've gone really in quite different directions indeed. So the dirk itself clearly has developed on from the medieval bollock dagger. It has the bollocks on the bollock dagger, and it has those same bollocks here on the dirk. Later on, shortly after this, let's say by 1700, that's stylised out of the picture and it's no longer clearly a bollock dagger. But at this period, they are. But let's forget about the dirk now, because this is about the Skean. Now, when it comes to the long and the short Skeans, they seem to be decorated in two distinctive styles. One is decorated like the short Skeans, the other is decorated like the long. So the long Skeans have this distinctive spiral that runs around the grip. They have a grip that's wasted in this form, in this shape, and wasted in that way as well. Little bit of decoration top and bottom, a band of it. But then above and below that decoration are these really distinctive metal rings. Now, the one at the bottom creates fantastic reinforcement for the grip, because these are long, heavy knives. They're going to put a complete battering onto the grip. And actually, there's a real chance that these things are going to fracture away. And so that bottom ring gives you really good support there. The top ring, again, I'm not sure really what the purpose of it is, but it is certainly decorative and it is certainly there. That is then fixed with a series of wedges. You can see the wedges, like hammer wedges, are driven in. Push the wood apart, lock the ring into place. Very unusual, very strange, and I don't know any other knives that have been constructed quite like this. So I made a short film last summer when I was making the samples of these pieces, and just have a look at this. It shows how they're put together, the role of the wedges and the rings and everything else. I'm going to cut and bend the brass for the ferrules. In some examples, these wedges are really uniform. In others, they're a little bit random. So you can see here that this particular example is using the wedges in a very decorative way. The function is still the same, but it is now, well, added detail. Whereas we have another one here from a short skean, where you can see that the wedges are pretty random and they've just been slammed in there haphazardly. So they're not acting as decoration, but they are functionally doing exactly the same job. Really intriguing way of approaching it. The grip rings themselves are also interesting. Now, I've actually cast these in brass for cost reasons, but the originals were made in steel, but they brass plated them. So the Irish seem to have a thing for brass plating all sorts of bits and pieces, like arrowheads, spearheads, sword components, and as it turns out, skean components. So let's look at the sheath. So what we have here is thick leather, single layer, and it's structured in such a way that it comes well up over the handle. So it secures the knife very well, encompasses, protects the handle even. The sheath itself was incredibly highly decorated. Every single skean example there is has an incredibly complex sheath. Now, again, for the money, I can't deliver that kind of thing. So we've given a decoration that's evocative of the original pieces. So that's all kind of fairly normal in a way, a lot of what you would expect for a knife of that period. But then we come to the shape. So the descriptions and what you can kind of make out of any existing pictures of the time show a shape that looks like it's made of twisted copper or bronze wire. So almost as a spiral going around the tip. And I have to say actually at this point that many of the sheaths, in fact, do not have shapes. But the ones that do seem to have something that's constructed much like this. A very peculiar way of making a shape. But it's also very distinctive. So when you want a knife that stands out from the others, although I suppose in Ireland it's not going to, but in the modern sense on a reenactment place, you have a long knife with a decorated sheath, a twisted wire shape, a twisted handle, carved handle, rings on it, wedges. If you want something distinctive, this is going to be it. So that's the skean fada, or the long skean. So let's have a look at the modoga, or modoga. Not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but the short skean. It has many similarities. In the case of this one here, there is just a slight faceting on the back of the blade. One of the short ones had that as an example. Otherwise, single-edged, stout blade, thick, and the handle rings on it and the wedging. But the handle decoration is quite different. We've gone from this twisted spiral going around the grip to basically a sort of a Scottish saltaire almost. It's slightly unusual. It's offset. So these limbs are offset from each other. And you might think that that was just an accident, a bit of bad carving, because I did copy one particular example. But there's another example where the carving is very distinctive on it, and it has exactly that same offset to the saltaire. Why? I don't know, who knows? But anyway, other than that, the construction of the knife is basically the same. It's a shorter version made in exactly the same way as the longer one. So it has the rings, it has the wedges, it has the wasted grip going in that orientation there. And again, the stout and strong broad blade. So although these are coming in at 9 or 10 inches, so 23, 25 centimetres, again, they can go up to ½ inch thick on the blade. So it's going to be like a pry bar at that kind of thickness. I've gone to one of the thinner ends of the historic examples. Again, it's about 8mm, but it makes for a very substantial fighting knife, just like its bigger brother. And the sheath itself is constructed in a very similar way as well. So it comes high up the handle, it's got decoration on it, and the twisted wire shape at the bottom. Now, there is a little bit of reference to skeans in the literature, and these short ones particularly, I think there are 2 references where in both times they're talked about being thrown. Now, I would read that to be that they were thrown as part of that story, part of that situation, part of that event. I do not believe that these are specifically throwing knives. As much as anything else, this handle construction, it'll last a while, but it's just not tough enough to be a repeated throwing knife. All of this hard work that's been put into some really nicely, beautifully made carving is going to get chipped off and knocked off. Yeah, you can throw it, but you can throw any kind of a knife. I don't believe that that's what these were. But there's another mention about skeans that I think is really interesting, really intriguing. And that is Bristol Docks 1526. Now, there is an established trade in shipping knives from England out to Ireland. But there are 2 references to shipping knives from Ireland to England. Now, there was plenty of international trade in arms and armour and all sorts of other goods in Europe at this period. So, for instance, you might get a suit of armour that is made in Germany, but it's for the English market. So it's styled for English people, the things that English people liked, but it was made in Germany. Now, I don't think, and I might be doing a disservice to Ireland at this period, but I don't think Ireland was sophisticated, advanced enough as a manufacturing base that it could make knives in the English style to be sold to English people, but making them in Ireland. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what I suspect is, in fact, they were exporting Irish knives. They were exporting Skean into England. And that makes it really interesting as well, because suddenly you have the possibility of guys in London, in Bristol, in Liverpool, walking down the street with Irish Skean, which is not something that I'd really considered. It comes back to the really interesting aspect, which is that these things are almost nowhere in the record. In this whole book dedicated to the Skean, there are 7 examples. That's all Robert has been able to find. 7 examples. But these should be everywhere. This was the standard fighting knife for Kern and Gala glass. Maybe they were exported to England as well. They should be all over the archaeological record, and yet they're not. Throw your hat in the ring. Tell us why you think that might be the case. Because it doesn't seem right to me that there is so little evidence left behind of a knife that was around for the best part of 300 years. But the other thing that we can conclude from all of this is that Tod Cutler makes Skean. The short modoga, the Skean fada, the long one. And they are available right now. But also, if you enjoyed this, go and check out our website, because it'll be full of all sorts of things that you're interested in. Go and have a look at our secondary channel, todcutler.com, because it's got lots of little niche content about all sorts of stuff. But again, things you'll be interested in. And if you want to help support us, go and have a look at the Patreon page. But anyway, Irish Skeans, courtesy of Robert Gresh's book. Thank you very much.